President Cyril Ramaphosa says the ANC remains committed to correcting its mistakes since assuming power in 1994. These include eradicating poverty, creating jobs, stabilizing the economy, supplying electricity and water, and clamping down on crime. He was delivering the governing party's election manifesto at a packed Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. But to help us analyze Ramaphosa's message to ANC voters is political analyst Professor Bheki Mngomezulu. Professor Mngomezulu, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, it's promises season. Again, Ramaphosa making more promises and above what we heard from his recent State of the Nation address, of course. This time highlighting 6 priorities. Your reaction to the ANC's manifesto launch this afternoon?
Thank you very much, Sisi, for having me, and good evening to your viewers. First of all, let us congratulate the ANC for hosting this manifesto event successfully at an almost packed Moses Mabhida Stadium, and the fact that we have not heard of any violent activities taking place. So we congratulate them for that. But as for the substance of the manifesto, the 6 priorities that the President referred to are quite okay, but then the problem is that if you look at the first 4, all of them will require electricity. You cannot address the issue of the standard of living without electricity. You cannot also create jobs without electricity. Basically, there are a number of things that you cannot do. Even putting South Africa first, you cannot put South Africa first or put South Africa at work in an event where you don't have electricity supply. The other 2, consolidating democracy and then making sure that you take care of the interests of the country and of the world, that one is okay. But then the first 4, they will depend on electricity supply. And I was not particularly happy when the President did not spend time on how he plans, or his party plans, to address the issue of load shedding. And coincidentally, when he presented the State of the Nation address, immediately when he finished, we moved from stage 2 to stage 3, then the following day on Friday, stage 4, then Saturday, stage 6. Today, immediately after he finished, where I am, we're struck by load shedding again. And before then, we're on stage 4, which means this is the reality that we have to live with. And unfortunately, there wasn't enough time, in my view, that was spent on this very pertinent issue.
And that is actually my follow-up question I wanted to ask you. Do you feel that there was sufficient time to talk about that he spent talking about load shedding and the crisis that it faces? And do you perhaps think he shied away from this topic a little more than in the State of the Nation address, considering that we went straight to stage 6 for the first time this year, immediately after he had made such promises? So perhaps to cover and have a bit of a shield, maybe not focus too much on that. But considering that other political parties have launched their election manifestos and they have a big focus on load shedding, did he do himself a disservice there?
Absolutely, absolutely. Remember that when he delivered the State of the Nation address, he told to us about this Newzroom who has everything going well for him or her, whatever the case may be. And then he also said that at long last, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Dealing with the load shedding once and for all is now in sight. And then, as you correctly pointed out, immediately thereafter, something totally different happened. Then on Friday, he presented the State of the Nation address on Thursday. Then on Friday, during the golf tournament, then the President was asked a similar question. Mr. President, when is load shedding going to end? And then he made a U-turn. He said, no, it's not easy to say precisely as to when it's going to end, because here you are dealing with machines and anything can happen. So which means that he was now providing a rational answer. On Thursday, he was giving an irrational answer, which could not be substantiated by evidence. I think one of the reasons why the President this time around, and his party, of course, because he was only the spokesperson for the party. So the reason why he didn't want to dwell much on electricity is because he's well aware that the country has been deceived for too long, and then now they've run out of things to say. Because even when he appointed the Minister of Electricity, President Cyril Ramaphosa, some of us were saying that he did not have to do that. All he needed to do was to just commission a 3-month study, look at where the problems are, and then get engineers to implement the plan without appointing a minister. In fact, we don't need Minister Ramaphosa to run that ministry. We don't need the ministry at all. And one would have expected then that the president and his party would be well aware that this is a thorny issue. Load shedding is a thorny issue which affects everything else that we stand for. Whether talking about investment, job creation, and everything else, it all depends on the existence of or the availability of the energy supply. If it's not there, we are not going to achieve any of the things we think we are going to do.
Prof, you make mention of Dintswalo. Now, before today's events last night, the party hosted a gala dinner where they drove the point of Dintswalo even at that dinner as well. You know, he was relaying stories of people who have their own experiences, saying they are Dintswalos themselves, saying he's met many of these people across the country, and it's basically reinforced his belief of the story on Tale of Dintswalo. And I guess we can't take away that there are those who can relate to that Tale of Dintswalo, but also in the same breath, there are those who are still very much disenfranchised, and because of those very ANC failures.
You know, my sister, I'm a researcher. If you're a researcher, you collect data, and then if you manipulate data, that is considered unethical behavior. What you do, you collect data, you then look at what the data says, and then you present it as it is. Even when you interpret it, you don't tamper with it. So in this case, you are absolutely right. There are people who have benefited, that Dintswalos who are on the positive side, but there are also other Dintswalos. That's why some of us, when we were criticizing the president after the State of the Nation address, we accused him of having looked at one side of the coin. We said it might well be true that there are people who have benefited, and there are some programs of the ANC that are forward-looking and that have produced positive results. We cannot take that away. But then let's compare them with the ones that are on the negative side. How many are they in comparative terms? Do we have more Dintswalos that have performed well or that have enjoyed all the benefits more than the ones that have suffered? That is where the reality is. If you look, for example, at I'm at an academic institution, you look at NSFAS. It's true that government has provided NSFAS. Initially, it was run by universities, but then at a later stage, it was centralized. And there are more problems now that it has been centralized than there were when NSFAS was controlled by universities. And the 4 companies that were appointed to run NSFAS, they've basically done the country a disservice. You find students who qualify for 2 months. On the 3rd month, they don't get the money. They get it on the 4th month. There is no back pay. Where does the money go? You get students who have 2 rand that has come in, some 5 rand, others 7 rand. Where did the money go? Some students see the money. When they try to withdraw it, the money disappears. Where does it go? So and that affects a lot of students than the Dintswalo that has access to NSFAS and gets the money in full. So that is where the problem is.
Cadre deployment has also been in the spotlight a lot recently. The policies have come under fire in light of the High Court also dismissing the DA's application to scrap cadre deployment, notwithstanding that they have the same accusations too. Now, today, Ramaphosa reaffirmed that cadre deployment within the party is not going anywhere. What do you make of that? And is the issue cadre deployment or how the ANC is implementing cadre deployment?
You know, my sister, let me be honest with you on that one. I agree with the president 100%. I've always said there is no problem with cadre deployment. The problem is how cadre deployment is done. If you take me, I'm a social scientist, and then you say that I'm going to be a minister of electricity without electrical engineering, well, that's a recipe for disaster. Or you take me, you say I must be a minister of finance. That's a recipe for disaster. The only time cadre deployment becomes a problem is when you appoint people into positions they don't qualify for. That is where the problem is. But in principle, cadre deployment is used globally. Even the DA is using cadre deployment. They might not be using the term cadre deployment, but they're doing exactly the same thing. You go to any country across the globe. Luckily, I do international relations. You look at all the countries, that is what they do. In most cases, we cite Singapore, which puts forward a meritocracy, where you appoint people based on their requisite skills and knowledge. That is the way to go. Even when you apply or implement cadre deployment, you can still use the same principle of meritocracy. Among your cadres that you are deploying, look at their skills, a skill set, and then appoint them into positions where they are going to fit neatly. In cases where there are deficiencies, first capacitate them, then appoint them. So cadre deployment is not a problem, my sister. It will never be a problem. And I agree with the ANC when they say that they are going to retain that policy. And in fact, the DA, which went to court and is now going back to the Constitutional Court, saying that the ANC has not provided them with enough information, they should also do the same. They must make their appointment procedures public. Because during elections, you see a lot of black faces canvassing for the DA. But once they've won the election or in the Western Cape, then the parliament in the Western Cape is predominantly white. The Federal Council is predominantly white. So then what does it tell you? Is it not cadre deployment as well? Those are the questions we'll be asking going forward.
Yeah, interesting indeed. Now let's move on to job creation before I let you go. Prof. Mngomezulu, the ANC president said they will create 2.5 million job opportunities. From where? And in fact, he said verbatim that they can and they will. Now, if they can and they will, why haven't they?
No, that's one point you don't have to take seriously, my sister. We've heard this many times before. When we are told that the new government is going to create an X number of jobs, even other political parties are saying the same. Either they say they're going to create 2 million jobs or they're going to create 2.5 million jobs, whatever the case may be. The reality is that all politicians know that South Africa is facing this as one of the problems. It is job scarcity. So they will always talk about that, and the figures will obviously then differ. Some will say 1 million, 2 million, 2.5 million. But then the reality is that unless you address that issue we talked about earlier on, that of a load shedding, you are not going to create jobs. Because for you to create jobs, not all jobs are created by government. Other jobs are created by the private sector. Now, how is the private sector going to employ more people when instead of working for 8 hours, they work 2 or 3 hours? Where are they going to generate income from? Which means then that they'll be working at a loss. You also talk about the prospects of attracting investors. Who is going to invest in a country where energy supply is not guaranteed? Because for you to invest in that country, you must be assured that if you are working for 10 hours, then you are going to work for 10 hours, and then you know how much profit you are going to make. So I think the issue of job creation, in fact, is one issue that politicians should not even be entertaining. The focus should be on addressing the issue of load shedding. Then everything else will fall into place. Of course, not disregarding the fact that once you have addressed the issue of load shedding, you also have to address the issue of corruption, because even if there is no load shedding and money comes in through taxes and other forms, if you engage in corrupt activities, that money is not going to end where it's supposed to be. End users will still remain bankrupt when those who are in power amass more and more wealth to what they already have at the moment.
Truly South Africa's two big cancers, load shedding and corruption. Prof. Mngomezulu, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Always enjoy hearing your insights.